On this episode, we talk to Tom Waller, well-known Thai film producer and director of the new film The Cave.
So if you're interested in learning about the Thai film industry and what it was like to shoot a film based on a globally famous Thai event, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 and who has had his kratong loyed one too many times.
I'm sure you have. And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 19 years ago, fell in love with the people trying to sell me wooden frogs that make odd semi-ribbit sounds. And so I never left.
Riveted for her pleasure.
That's right. We want to say thank you to one of our patrons, Mark Savlov, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after our interview with film director Tom Waller to hear why Mark is going to be the official Bangkok Podcast music guru when he finally moves to Thailand. Before we start, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to our regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. And trust me, they are random. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we discussed technical fails, or technology fails might be better, and what it's like dealing with professional diplomats, well-trained people with actual social skills, and followed it up with a chat about the incredible amount of variety we have in Thailand now when it comes to media options, where Greg totaled up all of the things he pays for online every month. So to get all that good stuff, simply become a patron by visiting bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Yeah, baby. And before we jump into it, I also want to mention big shout out thanks to Billy and the crew at La Monita, who had their 10th anniversary birthday party this past weekend, which I went to. Man, 10 years is a long time. And
insane.
Yeah, you've been there, Ed. You like it. It's a good place. And listeners, if you haven't been there, La Monita is such a great restaurant. They got such good food. And Billy is super, super nice. And might I add, the best margaritas in Bangkok, I think.
Quite good. I've had them.
Yeah, and it was a fun night. And I had mezcal for the first time, which is sort of a derivative of vodka, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure.
No, derivative of tequila, dude.
Tequila, sorry, yeah, that's how drunk I was. Anyway, yeah, let's just say Sunday was not a very productive day, but it was a hell of a time. So many congratulations to Billy and the crew for 10 years.
Yeah, that's huge.
One of my favorite places in Bangkok. All right, on this episode, we are very excited to have one of Thailand's most well-known film personalities, a young fella by the name of Tom Waller. Now, since he's not in front of the camera, you might not know his name, but you've probably seen his stuff. He's won numerous Thai film awards and can be seen on red carpets from New York to Cannes to Vancouver. He has produced movies such as The Butterfly Man, Elephant White, Mechanic Resurrection, and The Ghost of Manak. As a director, he's known for Mindfulness and Murder, The Last Executioner, and Tata Young's hit video El Niño. His latest movie, The Cave, is the first major release about the incredible story of the Wild Boar football team that was rescued from Tam Luang Cave in 2018. You're definitely going to hear about that. So Tom was kind enough to invite Ed and I to the premiere of the film last night, which we'll discuss in the interview, as well as Tom's career managing international productions in Thailand and the general outlook for cinema in the kingdom. So here's our interview with Tom Waller. All right, well, we are really excited to be sitting down here with this week's guest, one Mr. Tom Waller. And we also have been surprised with another guest tonight, and that is Mr. Jim Warny. And we're going to get into a bit more of who these people are and why they're on the show soon. But if you don't know the name Tom Waller, then you probably have seen some of his work. Tom's one of the, I just say, most well-known personalities in the Thai film industry. Certainly one of the most prolific. Is that certainly one of the most handsome?
No doubt.
So, Tom, welcome to the Bangkok podcast. It's the first time you've been on.
I'll pay you later, guys.
Thanks. Cool. We take payments in beer or money. And Tom and I have been chatting for a long time now about coming on the show. And first, it started out as a conversation about the film industry in Thailand, and then Tom suggested that since his film, which he directed, The Cave, was coming out soon, that we should work towards working that into the interview. So, as we record this, I saw the premiere of The Cave last night, and the film opens tomorrow. That's the day this podcast comes out. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Tom also suggested that we be joined by Jim Warny, who was one of the divers that helped to rescue the 13 trapped people in the cave. And he is sitting with us here now too. You were at the premiere last night. So Jim, also welcome to the Bangkok podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Now I've done my talking, and so let's jump right into it. Tom, you wrote and directed this film. Tell us about that process. When did you start? And how did you decide to jump into a project this big?
Well, everyone was watching the news on this topic, and I, like everyone else, followed it avidly. And to be honest, people's hearts were beating. It was something that they came back to every day to see whether these kids had got out of the cave. And we all know what happened in the end, that the kids got out. But it's really what was interesting for me was how these kids were brought out of the cave, in what way they were dragged through those flooded tunnels, and how that operation went down. And for me, that's kind of something that we never had that personal perspective of the rescuers themselves. So for me, it had innate appeal, and I just thought, why not make a film about this story from the point of view of those unsung heroes that were involved in the mission to bring those kids out.
Tom, so you acted pretty quickly. Was that something in your mind that you wanted to get this done right away? I mean, you had to guess that there would be other people interested in the story. I was just impressed at how quickly you worked and how you made this happen.
Yeah, to be honest, I knew that other people would be interested in making a movie about this subject. I mean, Hollywood came along and said, yeah, we want to make this into a like a Hollywood film. And I thought, well, at least if I'm going to make this film, I'm going to have to do it from kind of a very different point of view, a very unique perspective. And so I decided to concentrate on the personal perspectives of these unsung heroes, the guys that we didn't know about, because there are a lot of people who are in the press already, and they were celebrated, divers, John Valantha and Rick Stanton involved in the guys who actually found the boys. And then I just thought, well, wouldn't it be great to take someone else from that group and follow their story? And what better person to bring us into the story than a diver who was based in Ireland, which is where actually I watched the news in Ireland at the time. And I saw this article about a news article on Jim's return. He got a hero's welcome when he returned to Ireland after the mission. And I just thought, it's such a coincidence that there's a guy living in Ireland from County Clare, in the next county to where I was staying with my dad, who's Irish. And I just thought, he's like an hour's drive away. Why not get in touch with this guy and see whether he'd be up for making a movie?
Yeah. Tom, some of our listeners will know your background, but some won't. So, I mean, you kind of pointed it out there, but can you just tell us about your background? Because in a way, it makes you, I think, maybe uniquely qualified to make this movie.
So I'm born in Bangkok. My mother's Thai and my father's Irish. So I was, in a way, this project was kind of made for me in a way, because it featured this character who came from Ireland, and a story that takes place in the north of Thailand, where my mum lives in Chiang Mai, and for me to have access to Jim and to get in touch with, and maybe I should talk a bit about how I got in touch with him, because honestly, people asked me, and I said, well, I just reached out on social media. I literally Facebooked him.
Really?
And Jim, who's sitting here now, thankfully he responded.
Right. So that was just out of the blue, and this random dude from Thailand says, "Hey, making a movie."
Yeah, there was lots of requests coming in from all sorts of angles, different forms of media, and it was quite overwhelming. And Tom came on the scene quite early, and the big difference with him was that I got to meet him in person, and he came to me and wanted to find out, was there a story to be made? Not with an offer, or not with a piece of paperwork or an email. It was very natural from the start, and it it grew from there, and it felt right. But I'm not saying it was an easy choice. It was definitely, we're volunteers, rescue volunteers, so we don't sell ourselves usually, or we don't get thrust into the limelight. So all this experience after the rescue was completely alien to us, and it was quite a confusing time for the whole team to try to grasp how to tell the story correctly, how to do the story right. And, there's so many people involved. If I tell my story, or what are other people that are involved going to think about it? And it was a total, total mess in my head to know what to do and to do the right thing.
You're an electrician back in Ireland?
Yeah, just an electrician.
And you dive for fun?
For fun, and I'm also a volunteer in the Irish Cave Rescue Organisation. Okay. And
So I know this was in the news last year, but I've already forgotten the details. How exactly did European cave divers get involved? I mean, I'm just kind of curious how that happened.
Well, very well. In Thailand, there was no such thing as cave rescue. Most of the caving in Ireland, in Thailand, and in all the cave exploration would be done by expat cavers, mainly from the UK, because it's a big sport in the UK, and therefore British teams in exploration and in rescue are very advanced and very highly skilled. But lucky enough, when the rescue went on, the army arrived, officials arrived, and they didn't really know what to do. And they had military divers, which are trained for open water, not for operating in caves. There was no one in Thailand that was trained to operate in the caves.
It's a fascinating thing, because I know almost nothing about diving, but when you think about Thailand, you think about diving. So you figure Thailand's got to have these incredible divers, but cave diving
is very specific, and especially inland cave diving. In low visibility, high flow, unpredictable.
It's one of the most dangerous sports in the world, isn't it?
Well, if done correctly, and if you, yes, there is an element of risk involved, but the big challenge is to calculate those risks and manage those risks. And,
I got to say, on the podcast we do. I don't know what the right word is. We criticize the Thai government fairly often, I would say.
Lightly. We know we're...
Yeah. But I remember watching this unfold last year, and I just thought it was so awesome that Thailand was just accepting help from worldwide experts, just whoever can help, who's ever got the expertise. That was the right move.
Yes, but that didn't come automatically, So the expat caver that was in the area said you have to get these guys in from the UK to come and help. So these guys flew over, organised through the Minister of Tourism. So it wasn't anything to do with the army. But then when those guys arrived, they wanted to get into the cave and start doing something. But the military saw amateurs coming to do their job.
Wouldn't let them in.
Wouldn't let them in. Yeah.
Also initially,
it was quite a challenge, and right throughout the rescue, and as you know, sadly, one of the Thai Navy divers passed away, and we don't know exactly what happened. We can imagine what happened. They were operating outside their element, and they were very brave and very, very methodical in what they did, but they were not trained as cave divers, whereas we were.
That was one really interesting element of the film, because I never knew that so much. Cock blocking, for lack of a better word, happened, but there were several really sort of tense scenes where these people were showing up, the divers, and just random Thai people as well, and saying, I want to help. And the guy was like, oh, you got to go to the office of this guy and fill out this paperwork and get a permit. And, especially... well,
I think every Farang in Thailand knows that drill, the red tape.
Yeah, and it was so representative of trying to just do something so simple in Thailand, and it's like, you gotta have the permits.
Yeah.
But this was, it wasn't opening a new bank account. It was life and death, and it was sort of really interesting to see the frustration of people, like, just smacking their heads, like, come on. But you also understood that the Thai government, they had to have liability in their minds, and if it did go wrong, it could have turned into a PR nightmare. And these are all things that you need to think about, but it was still really interesting to watch.
Well, I think they're very lucky that they had Jim and the other divers who are really expert, at what they do. They do this as a hobby as well. They're amateurs, so they're not professional rescue workers. But you ended up acting as professional rescue workers, and you knew what you were doing. And that's what I think I tried to capture in the movie, is that this was a story that, of ordinary people who became heroes. And so that was really the kind of, I was kind of thinking to myself, what's going to be on the poster? Is it going to be Tom Hanks or is it going to be Jim? And I thought to myself, well, there's no good having Tom Hanks trying to play a Belgian guy who has an Irish accent who knows how to cave dive. So it might as well be Jim. So that's one of the reasons why I decided in the end to use the real people, was just because it would be more authentic and kind of cool in a way that you don't see that many films which have ordinary people playing, people playing themselves. Clint Eastwood did it in 1517 to Paris. Right. And that was one of the films I saw prior to when this event happened. And that gave me some inspiration to do a film where I use non-actors alongside real actors and sort of blend them together so that it's so you don't, when you watch the film, you don't really know who's a real actor and who's not.
Well, let's get into that a little bit, because one of the characters that caught my eye was, and forgive me, I forget his name, but he was the guy with the jet pumps.
Puyai Tan, yeah.
Puyai Tan, yeah. First of all, that actor and that character, I thought he was great. He's not an actor. He's just an uncle.
That's
what blew my mind, because I walked out of the movie theater and the dude was standing right there. I'm like, holy crap, that's the guy. But he played it so well. He was just this regular blue-collar dude, a Thai dude, an older guy who wanted to help. And he had this company that happened to make these jet pumps.
Yeah.
That would have been very helpful. So how did you decide to use his story instead of one of the other people that must have been trying to help?
Because, to be honest, the story of these unsung guys was more interesting than doing a story of the kind of main protagonists. Because, first of all, getting access. I didn't have access to the kids at all. So,
right.
the Thai government had already chaperoned them and said, listen, you have to go through us if you want to get to the kids. And so they said no. We applied for permission, and they said no. You can't talk to the kids unless you're going to bid for the rights. And I wasn't in a position to do that. So I said, listen, we'll take the story in another direction. We'll make this film about these other characters who are actually more interesting in a way, to tell the story from the outside of the cave rather than from inside the cave. So we have actors representing the kids, and we have the coach is represented by an actor. But for the most part, the movie concentrates on the volunteer spirit of the rescue workers and the people who came to the mountainside to help.
Yeah. But that one guy's story was just really, I found it quite touching. And this guy had the best line in the film, Puyai Tan, with the permit.
Oh, when he has the badge.
Yeah, I got a huge laugh. It was great. But it was good to see just the local people involved as well. Like the one woman who was praying for her nephew. She was a local actress. Was she a real person?
she's an actress actually, but she's playing a real character that in the storyline actually rang Puyai and said, listen, Puyai he went to the camp and he tried to set up his pumps, and they said, you can't come in. We don't know who you are. You haven't got a permit. So he just decided to turn around and go home after 3 days of being there and not being allowed in. And, she rang him and said, listen, I'm going to get all the other families and we're going to go petition the governor in order to get your pumps in.
Right.
So please turn around and come back.
This is in the film, too.
And this is in the film, yeah. So he does. So he turns around, he comes back, and that's kind of a little bit of a warm moment in the movie, because you suddenly realize that, okay, the chances are he will be able to get his pumps in.
Right. Yeah.
So Jim, I'm sorry, I don't know your background. Did you have a connection to Thailand before you got called?
No, never been to Thailand before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, hell of a first trip.
Yeah, really, hell of a first trip. Hell of a vacation.
You knew where it was, sort of, right?
Sort of, yeah.
So, I'm curious, it's such a weird way to be introduced to Thailand. Like, now do you feel this connection? Like, do you think you're going to come back here? Or
Yeah, very much so. I always heard, I had an image of Thailand, which is the image of the tourist industry and sex industry and stuff. So, kind of a cliche image of Thailand. So I never really knew about the people being so nice. And it was really, when I landed there in northern Thailand, yes, the people were hugely grateful but you could also see that they're really people with a big open heart, and a very special kind of people.
Well, I know there's a great podcast called the Bangkok Podcast. It's great for expats. So if you decide to come live here, you should listen to the Bangkok Podcast. I recommend it.
No, there's something I want to tell us a quick story. And one of my favorite, I went to film school way back in the day, so I'm sort of a film nerd. And one of my favorite film guys is James Cameron, who directed The Terminator, Aliens, Titanic, and The Abyss. And one of the best making of documentaries I've ever seen is of The Abyss, which was a sort of this famously difficult shoot. And at the beginning of the film, the Abyss, for those that don't know, takes this it's about an underwater drilling rig which gets stranded at the bottom of the ocean and how they rescue them. And there's aliens involved, which is a little bit of a right angle, but this documentary opens on a black screen, and James Cameron in full diving gear with a breathing helmet walks in to the frame, and he says, "I'm Jim Cameron, and I'm going to take you into a world of cold, darkness, and unrelenting pressure. The film business." So what was your thought when Tom said, "Why don't you be in the film?"
Well, before, or the pressure started before Tom telling the story, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then once we got involved with the story, and I it very quickly and it naturally happened that I had to be involved in every aspect, because Tom has no experience in caving or diving, and we're telling a story that I saw through my eyes. So I was involved in the script writing and the technical aspects of equipment and stuff, and then it was only natural. I don't think it was really a decision to make me play. It just happened.
It happened that way. I think I just realized at the end of the day, it'd be a lot easier if I could just get Jim to play Jim. And we did screen test you. I mean, I got my iPhone out and I started shooting some scenes. The scenes in the Greg, you saw the movie, so the scenes in the house with Jim and his fiance. Those are all, we kind of blocked that. We kind of did a little run through when I first met Jim, and so I just wanted to see how terrible they'd be on screen, and they were actually very natural. And I just thought, what, they could just be themselves.
Jim, was it stressful to relive it, or did it feel good? Like, it just seems weird that you lived through this semi-nightmare, and then you're like, hey, I'll just do it again.
That's the most asked question. And
okay.
Yeah. Was it stressful? Yes, but so was the rescue. So it's very much parallel emotions of being in a rescue, out of your element, this huge task against the odds that you have, and the language barrier, the awkwardness. We're not used to attention that much. We usually operate in a small team, away from media and stuff. So I was hugely out of my comfort zone there. And then in the movie, the same. I'm quite reserved or introvert, so I'm not a performer, or I'm not.
Right.
Now I've learned how to talk and stuff in front of big groups, but back then, and that shows on the screen that I was awkward, and that it was out of my comfort zone. But that was the real thing as well, so that's why it worked, I think. Did I pinch myself when for flashbacks or something? Not really. I had genuine concerns of safety when we were operating in the water with kids again. There was, although it was a controlled environment, there were still risks, because it was real water.
Sure. And
kids that didn't dive, actors that weren't familiar with diving. So there was a sense of duty of care, not as heavy as in the rescue, but still it was there, and that's all that added to the realism. Yes, when I strapped the mask on a kid's face, I had to say, "What am I doing again?" But not to a point that I'm getting flashbacks here. But,
right. Yeah. When I was directing way back in film school, it was really frustrating directing non-actors, because you would say, "Okay, say your line," and they would say their line, and then they'd look right into the camera like, "Am I done?" And just ruin the take. So, Tom, what kind of preparation and training did you give these non-actors? Because I've done a little bit of it, and it's not easy.
It isn't easy to get a performance out of them, but it's easier to get them to just reenact what they were doing. So I'd literally say to Puyai Tam, for example, I'd just say, "All right, well, Puyai, when you came to this, when you were here to come and get your punts, what do you do? Can you just show me what you would do? Where were you when you got the phone call?" And he said, "Oh, I was just down in the workshop." "All right, well, show me where you were, and then we'll block it, and we'll just have some cameras. We'll put the cameras up here," and we had multi-cameras, so we were shooting with at least 2 cameramen all the time. And it's kind of like voyeurism. We would just like plant the actors or the characters in the scene and kind of let it roll. And, I wouldn't even call action, because if you call action, then suddenly they sort of freeze, they sort of, and it's sort of like almost as if, they were only natural when you sort of call cut. So I had to sort of stop doing that and say, "All right, well, listen, you know what? Let's just, we're going to set up." And they just knew as soon as you have the slate go down, they kind of know that they're on.
Right.
And so it got to the point where I never had to say action with these non-actors because the slate goes down and they just stop doing their thing.
Right.
Tom, I got a question for you. I've seen a bunch of your movies. I don't think I've seen them all, but I just see this incredible variety in all the movies you've made. I'm just curious if this is some intentional thing. Is it just kind of worked out that way? I mean, your movies are so different. They're so varied.
I think as a filmmaker, I like to tackle subjects that I'm kind of not exactly familiar with. So, for example, when I made the film The Last Executioner, I knew nothing about death penalty and the prison systems in Thailand, and it just fascinated me to then say, well, look, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to find out about this guy who became Thailand's last prison executioner, and I just from reading a newspaper article, I literally came up with that idea to make a film. And there was an obituary where this guy was a rock and roll, basically, it sort of said rock and roll guitarist, who became Thailand's famed last executioner, dies aged 50, whatever. And I was like, well, this is a great story. I could just imagine this guy, 1 minute carrying a guitar and the next minute carrying a gun. And so for this film, I like the contrast of this electrician from Ireland, who suddenly in an international rescue operation that the whole world is watching.
It was shocking how quickly it became global. I'm watching the Tonight Show, and I was just like, oh my! The whole world was watching. I mean,
it wasn't just a few people. It was the whole.
It was billions, like a billion.
Well, building on that, was it stressful for you knowing that this film is essentially going to be like representing Thailand around the world?
I think, to be honest, the fact that there were other films being made kind of gave me comfort that I wasn't going to be the only one. But now we're the only one. So I think it's kind of the focus is on, and it's so easy to pick holes in films these days. So I'm sure that the film will have lovers and haters. There'll be people who can't stand the film and say, why didn't you use real actors and why isn't it more Hollywood? But listen, other people can make that story and they can do the Titanic version if they want to. James Cameron can make his version of this film. Right. But I've made mine, and Jim and I work very closely together on the story. I mean, although I wrote the script, Jim was feeding me the lines. I said, Jim, what did you say to this guy in that scene? And he's like, I said this, and he said that, and I just basically annotated it, sent it back to him, put it in a script format, and said, listen, what do you think about this dialogue? And he's like, yeah, that's basically what I said. And I say, are you sure? Because I don't want to get sued.
Right. So it's essentially kind of a docudrama, more or less.
It is a docu. That's sometimes a dirty word in the film business, because docudramas then, in terms of narrative feature films, they sometimes don't stand up to the same level. But I like to think this film as a narrative feature. It is fictitious because it's not a documentary, but it is, in terms of the style, it is documentary style, in that you get a lot of scenes which feel like it's realistic. But then so is Captain Phillips. So if you think Captain Phillips is a docudrama, then I'm in that category of docudrama. Not the here's a guy being interviewed and then we're going to show a reenactment, because it's what happens in most docudramas.
Right. Well, in most of those stories, the directors will always say something like, well, I had to take creative license and change this, and a lot of those movies make pretty big departures from real life. Is that the case with this film, or did you feel like really you're very few departures?
We had to telescope the story into the length of a feature film. So obviously 18 days, this was crammed into like a less than 2 hour film. So we had to take some dramatic license with some of the characters. So some of the characters are amalgams. We also had to change the timeline a little bit to make sure that things that happened in the right, they happened in the right order, but they might not necessarily have happened like straight after each other.
Right.
So in terms of the skeleton of the movie, I didn't have to do much embellishment. It was all already there. You could read the Wikipedia listing on the Tum Lung Cave Rescue, and that's how
it follows the movie.
It follows the movie, yeah.
Interesting.
Right. Or rather, the movie follows.
The movie follows. The movie. And in fact, in a way, life imitates art, which imitates life, because all this business of the permits. It was exactly the same with us when we tried to make this film. We didn't have a permit to enter the cave. So we couldn't go and film up in Tum Lung for months. It took Puyai maybe 4 or 5 days to get into the cave. It took me 4 or 5 months to get into Tum Lung.
Right. Did you pull up do you know who I am? I'm a filmmaker. I'm going to put Thailand on the map. Sorry, Jim, I want to keep talking a little bit about the technical part of things that I noticed during the filming. I noticed the character of Saman Kunan, who was the Thai Navy SEAL who drowned during the rescue operation. I noticed that you chose to film him. You didn't really see his face. Was there any decision about that?
Sure. I mean, the reason why you don't see his face is because we have his face in the movie, his real face. So we tried to make sure that audiences could relate to the real Saman. And, you know, by kind permission of the family, we were able to use the clips from his video selfie before he went to the rescue. And we were able to use that to then portray his character without even having an actor playing him. And that really was the trick, was to try and find a clever way of doing it. I've just ruined it now for everyone who hasn't seen the film, but in a way, for me, it was cathartic to have that process of, you know, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to be respectful? And the best way was actually to not have an actor playing him, but to have him playing himself.
I see. Yeah, I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, we don't really know what exactly happened, and you know that's a story that will never come out from the confines of the military.
Right.
What exactly happened, but we know the end result, and we captured that, you know, and yeah, it came out well.
I had a question about the kind of the dramatic structure of the film. I haven't seen it yet, but obviously it is an example of a film where we actually do know how it ends. And did you find when you're writing that you had to work around that or figure out some kind of dramatic arc because we knew what was going to happen? I mean, how did that enter into your writing?
Well, that was always going to be the challenge, is how do you make a film interesting when you know the ending? And, you know, we know they got stuck and we know they got out. I mean, for me, it was really about trying to create the suspense in the last kind of final act of the film when you see the rescue of the kids being extracted. The extraction itself takes place over 3 days. So our kind of final act is kind of really a final act in 3 parts. And it escalates because of Jim's involvement. So at the beginning, he was a support diver, and then he kind of gradually got kind of promoted. So the second day, you were giving ketamine injections to kids. And then on the 3rd day, you're actually bringing out one of the wild boars. So for me, it had to be sort of not... We didn't want to mess too much with the truth. So we were saying, listen, what is realistic and what do we need to show in order to create the idea that they're not gonna make it? And it's often done with, you know, supplementing the dialogue with, for example, context. So you have Americans saying, listen, we've done the maths on this. We reckon there's only going to be a 67% survival rate. And these are words that were said in those rooms. So we have information and sources that told us that the Thai authorities knew that there might be 3 or 4 kids who wouldn't come home. And that was something that I said, all right, well, we'll use that to then kind of up the drama of the film, in that, you know, when you're watching the film, you're sort of hopefully so engrossed by what's happening that you don't realize that actually these kids might not survive. And that was key, I think, for me, was to try and use all the tricks of within the filmmaker's toolbox, including use of dramatic music, the use of editing, the way that we can capture the emotions of the characters and the worries of Jim. And, you know, we see a lot of, I mean, there's quite a few shots of Jim looking pretty worried about the whole thing. So I think that's how I bring it out. And to me, that was really the finessing of the edit, you know, in the post-production, that we had to make sure that the film delivered on that level.
Jim, I got a question for you. And again, I'm sure you've had this question before. When you were going through this, I'm just curious what your mindset was. Were you in this mindset of just trying to stay 100% positive, we're going to get every kid out? Or were you in this mode of, we just got to do what we can, let's be realistic, we probably won't get all the kids? I'm curious, what was your mindset? Like, did you have an expectation? Like, how hopeful were you?
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, it's something we do in our exploration projects. Every cave dive, we have a list of what ifs. What if this happens? What if I run out of air? What if I run out of light? This list was a lot longer with the rescue, of course. And also it was untried territory because it was completely outside procedures, taking kids diving, sedating them, and all that stuff. So, yeah, all those risks, they continuously... there's a deck of cards rolling in your head and in your mind, and you try not to get overwhelmed by all that, but you don't ignore it either. You calculate constantly, and you set yourself small goals of, I get to chamber 3, and then I meet someone there, and then I take it from there. So small goals to achieve one big goal in the end.
Did you ever think it was hopeless?
No, we knew our plan could fail, and that our success rate, definitely the first day, we didn't know how the drugs were going to work on the kids, and even the doctor didn't really know. He was, outside his normal remit. So, but we didn't set ourselves up for failure. So we just went for it, and we stuck with our plan, and lucky enough, our plan worked. And as time progressed and as the days passed, throughout those 3 days, we became faster and more proficient. And but our core plan stayed the same. And I'm pretty sure, knock on wood, if it would ever happen again, our plan would be very similar, because we pre-calculated everything, all those what ifs, and
we also must have learned a lot from this.
Yeah, and we learned, and we've proven our techniques, and that's.
What's the reaction been from the diving community, from your buddies who do similar things?
Yeah, as cave divers, we always assess an accident, or we try to learn from accidents and incidents that other cave divers have. So we were very aware that our colleagues were going to do the same, and including myself, I was watching the news and I was trying to decipher the what was happening in Thailand before I even knew that I was going to end up there.
Now I'm curious, because obviously there will be other films. Do you expect to be involved in other films? I mean, without getting into the legal issues and stuff, I mean, obviously your character will have to play a role. Like, he will have to play a role, or
the right amount.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm sure the story can be told from a different angle, through a different point of view, and I'd only be a background figure. But yes, I will be involved in documentaries, but factual documentaries.
The question is now, are you an electrician who's also an actor, or are you an actor who is also an electrician?
I'm a once-in-a-lifetime actor, yes. Yes, I was a motivational speaker or a keynote speaker for a few months in my lifetime, but now that has all died down, and the movie after this week is launched and it's out there, so that's me finished with it.
And you're still cave diving, of course.
Still cave diving, and yeah, I do want to continue telling my story, just like before all this rescue stuff. I like bringing back results from my explorations, maps, documenting and writing articles and doing little YouTube videos, and I maybe now with my recognition, and I can bring that to a slightly different level, maybe on a documentary scale kind of thing, and I'd love to be involved in those kind of things.
Jim, there's now a hashtag after all those pictures you took last night at the premiere. Yeah. So
what's the hashtag?
hashtag Jim Warny. Because he was pretty busy taking pictures last night at the premiere. So.
Right.
For an electrician, it should say hashtag Jim Warny Electrical Services.
Lightning Jim Warny. I think
That's great.
All right, well, we're also lucky to be joined by a third special guest, which I had no idea was also going to be here tonight, and that's Olivier Lliboutry. Did I say that remotely?
That's totally correct, yes.
That's totally correct. Now, Olivier, very nice to meet you, and you did the music for The Cave.
Yes, indeed. I was very lucky to be involved in this project. I must say that this is the third collaboration with Tom Waller. We've done the two previous movies together. And this one was particularly challenging because the music, we knew the music will play an important role in the storytelling to make it look more like more cinematic and less documentary. But at the same time, we were very careful to not be
overblown,
to not be too Hollywoodish, to not be too much like an action, suspenseful thriller.
That's right. I mean, it's such a dramatic story. It would be easy for the music to just be too powerful.
Yes. So we have developed a method of working with Tom where I try to do demos based on the story, based on the script. I come up with themes and ideas, and I record demos, and then
I reject them.
Not all of them. Yeah, most of them, but not all. One survived. We always find a way, we always find a way to use them. Some one way or another, it always ends up in a movie.
Right.
And
Not exactly why I intended it.
How do you compose? Are you composing on piano or keys? Or
Well, the thing is that we're talking. I mean, we're talking low budget, production. So therefore, I wasn't able to afford an orchestra. But this is something I shouldn't say because actually it's
You
so
don't meant
well
to say those kind of
programmed.
things.
Yeah, I know. But maybe you should cut that. But I mean, it's let's say there is an orchestra. There is an orchestra. There is of course, a lot of electronics. Everything which is underwater has to be textures, has to be very spooky and out of this world type of sound. So the electronic that's just the best way to do it. And of course, what is very important is that we wanted to have a more acoustic, more not acoustic, but
organic,
more organic sound and vibe into the score. So we went to record all the bunch of Thai musicians from the north, from the
Lana,
from the Lana area, and
Right.
and for that we were helped by Joe Cummings, that I guess everybody knows here in
Sure,
Bangkok,
right.
who contracted players in the Chiang Mai area, and the music was recorded. I mean, it was overdubbed. So basically, what they've done is that they've did some overdubs on my work, on my cues, and they played themes on different instruments, and they've come up with some variations and some ideas, and they've also done 2 cues where actually it's Rangsam, one of the
So let me
producer.
just clarify. So they're playing Thai instruments on your music.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's great.
Exactly, they overdub.
Oh, I
I
see.
send them the tracks. I send them the playback, the
Yeah.
orchestral track, and they've added some recording on top. A lot of recording,
Oh, that's
and then I had to do a lot of editing, like in the last minute. They were already mixing the film, and I was receiving the track from Chiang Mai, and I was this is way too much. There's a lot of percussions, a lot of things. What am I going to do with all this? And I did some editing, and then the rest of the editing was done on the dubbing stage with someone that you should really mention, because I think he's the boss. Is Richard Hawks, who's your mixer.
Yes, Richard Hawks
Because-
has done a bunch of my movies. Yeah.
And really, basically, he almost mixed the music also, because I sent him all the stems, all the tracks, but I didn't really have time to do a proper, a Dolby mix like we normally do. We send the music which is already mixed, and the dubbing mixer only has to raise, to take up the volume, but
Oh, I
he
see.
actually worked on the sound of some of the instruments. He had
Oh, I
to spend some time doing some music mixing on top of movie mixing. So he did a great job, because I think yesterday it sounded amazing in a
Yeah,
I mean, that's
really
great.
good.
in a 7-1.
Well, it should sound good whenever you go to this. I mean, everyone who goes to the cinema, it'll sound like that.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds very good. So we have 3 layers. We have the orchestral, we have the electronic, and we have the Lana Thai music on top, and it creates a unique.
I bet you the Hollywood movies won't do that.
Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, you talk about Hollywood movies, but remember the rights have already been bought by Netflix. So in fact, it's gonna be a series on Netflix,
Right.
coming soon-ish. I mean, it's like
Right.
they haven't actually started the filming on that, but
So is there only a Netflix series, or do you think there'll be other Hollywood? I mean, I don't know.
well, you see, the
International.
rights of the kids' stories have already been exclusively signed to Netflix.
Oh, really? Okay.
So in fact, it's very hard for them to actually try and make a film about this story unless you go for kind of characters who haven't been, who are not the ones, not the divers and not the kids. And so I don't know how they would make a film.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe there won't be a big Hollywood movie about it. Maybe
Yeah,
not.
maybe not.
Yeah, which is why you should go see The Cave.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, Tom, I thank you guys. We won't keep you too much longer. I really enjoyed the film. I thought that for non-actors, the entire cast did a really good job. It's not easy, and I didn't see any parts where it was like, that guy's not an actor. I thought the way it was filmed, the way it was edited, and the way it was acted was great, and it was a fantastic movie and a scary adventure. So, Jim, thanks for being part of the original story. And thanks for being part of the movie again, too. And Tom, thank you for making the movie. And Olivier, thank you for doing a great score.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks, guys. All right, time for another round of Token Thai, where our good friend Bowling works with us to get to the bottom of certain quirky elements of Farang and Thai culture that confuse, befuddle, or vex those trying to expand their cultural horizons. So here we are with Bowling. All right, Bowling, what question are you thinking about this week?
Well, it's really, really common, but not so common. So, when I have foreign guests who comes to Thailand, maybe not the first time either, I invite them to my apartment. And as soon as they got in, they walk straight in. And I have almost every time it's like, shoes off. So why do you guys wearing the shoes that walk outside on the road? And you know how dirty Bangkok could be. And then stomp that same dirty shoes in your clean house. Why? Outside in the park where there's mud, a lane, and then, you take your shoes off and then walk barefoot.
Oh, man. Yeah, we seem to do it backwards, right? Like, I've thought about this a lot. And I got to be honest, this is a little bit of a strange question for me to try and figure out because I've been here so long. When I look at photos of myself back in Canada, back in the day when I was a teenager, and there's one particular photo of me where I'm sitting on a friend's sofa and I have my legs curled up next to me, like a little mermaid statue, of course. And I have my shoes on the sofa. And it gives me itches. Like it hurts to look at. And I don't understand why that's normal. So I've been here long enough that that's sort of been removed from my memory or my experience. But the only thing I can think of is that the streets are cleaner. That doesn't really make sense. I don't know. I guess. And also one thing I thought about too, is that a lot of homes in Western countries have carpet, but they don't in Bangkok. And I thought, well, maybe that's the reason. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, that makes it even worse. Because if you're walking on hardwood floors, it's easy to mop the mud. If you have carpet, you're screwed with mud. So I really don't know. I look at it now and it creeps me out.
I've got a weird take on this because when I was young in my own house, I used to like to walk around barefoot or just wearing socks. And my dad hated it for some reason. And my dad would always yell on me to put on my shoes in the house. And when I was a kid, I never understood it. This is a strange thing because even though it's a standard Western practice, it's actually something that as a kid, I would always ask my dad, like, why do I have to wear shoes in the house? I never understood it. And then eventually it was my destiny. It was my fate. It was my karma to move to Thailand. And then I get here and now it makes sense. Okay. Shoes when you're outside, no shoes on the inside. So maybe I was just born to move to Thailand, I think.
Right.
And another thing I thought about was that maybe it's cold.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like from my years of living in a cold country.
Yeah. It
could be cold, but
did people do that in Switzerland when you were there?
Well, not at my house.
I remember about 15 years ago, my then girlfriend and I went to Hong Kong, and it was like November or something, and it was pretty chilly. And she had never been outside of she'd been to Cambodia and Malaysia and hot countries, but this is her first time in a cold country. And one of her observations was that she looked around and she's like, everyone's wearing shoes. No one's wearing flip-flops. And I said, well, yeah, it's freezing cold. You don't wear flip-flops when it's cold. So that might have something to do with it, but I don't know. Maybe you'd have to ask someone from Arkansas.
No, because my friend from Hong Kong that I visit often, she's also yell at people wearing shoes into her apartment.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we're just lazy and we just, it's hard for me to hit upon a real answer to this because, like I said, I've been conditioned now after 20 years in Thailand to see it as like a horrendous faux pas, so I don't have an answer. I don't know.
The only thing I can think of is that obviously if you wear shoes in the house, your feet stay clean. So when you take off your shoes to go to bed, your feet are perfectly clean. And if you walk around the house
with no shoes on, even though obviously it's cleaner than outside. Obviously, your feet get dirty. So maybe when you then get in bed, your feet are dirtier than they would be if you walked around with shoes on.
But then your feet will be smellier because you wear shoes all the time.
Well, not if you have Dr. Scholl's anti-odor inserts. But that makes me think of something too. And a lot of times, especially when it's cold outside in Canada, you only have one shower every day. Sometimes you don't even have a shower if it's very cold in the wintertime. You can go 2 days, sometimes 3, all right, if you were really lazy, without having a shower. That's just not doable here.
Right.
But if you're not having a shower that day and then you keep your shoes on, your clothes on, maybe you feel clean because you haven't been trotting around in the dirt all day. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. Greg's official answer to this is I don't know. When I look at it now, it disgusts me. What's Ed's official answer?
Well, I got to say pretty much the same. I've always wondered about it. I prefer the Thai way of doing things in this case.
It's still mysterious then.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bowling.
Thank you.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Mark Savlov for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. And Greg, what did you find out about Mark?
Well, and as it turns out, Mark listens to us all the way from Austin, Texas, which is, I'm led to believe, the hippest city in Texas. I'm not sure I've ever been there. Have you been there?
Actually, I've never been to Austin, but I consider it kind of a dream city because I'm a serious blues fan. Austin is a blues city. Plus, I'm a movie guy, and of course, Austin's got South by Southwest. But to say the hippest city in Texas, I got to be honest, that's not really saying a lot.
Well, I don't have an opinion because I'm only Canadian, but you're an American. You can say that. Well, that's the thing. Mark seems like the kind of guy we want to get to know for a few reasons. And I know you'd like him, Ed, for one particular reason, because Mark has been writing about film, music, and pop culture for 30 years.
Wow.
And is especially into the punk music scene. So he's an old school punk rocker.
Wow. Cool.
I wonder if he has like safety pins on the shoulders of his jacket.
I don't know. That's a fairly minor punk detail, but yeah, you're right.
Is it? It's about as punk as I roll.
I'm not sure that's the definition of punk, but you're right. That is like a minor punk thing.
Right. Well, Mark said that he came to Thailand for a bit of a lifestyle cleanse back in the day, and he immediately fell into the Thai punk scene. Cool. He said he Googled Thai punk, and he said there was a surprising number of people and bands and stuff like that. And he mentioned that he was even the front man for a punk band called the Diehards.
I'm not familiar with them. I can't say I know them.
That's right. Well, I think it's fair to say that neither you or I know much about punk, especially Thai punk. But have no fear, Mark is working on a book on just that. And I think, Ed, we ought to enlist his help to teach us about this part of the musical landscape, because I don't know much about punk, and I think you're a blues guy. You don't know much about punk either.
I'm in, man. I do know something about kind of American punk and a little bit about the hardcore scene, but I certainly don't know a lot about Thai punk.
Me neither. Well, when Mark comes over here, we can get his help. He can give you a mohawk.
Yeah, maybe in theory. Yeah.
He can give me a... What do I do? Maybe I can have like a goatee like that dude from Anthrax. What's his name? Scott Ian. Although he's not really punk. That's more like thrash metal, but
yeah, right.
Maybe I can do that. But I want him to make a punk version, like a punk remix of our podcast theme.
That'd be interesting. Cool. I'm down with that. I'm down with that.
Yeah. So Mark, when you make it here, let us know. We'll give you a MIDI and a TMZ 38. I don't know what the little pianos are. I have no idea what I'm talking about, obviously, but yeah, Mark, you can help usher Ed and I into the punk scene and get us going, bring us up to speed on what's cool and hip in the punk scene in Thailand, and be interesting element of the city to learn about that we obviously don't know much about. But
right.
Thank you for the support, man. We do appreciate it.
I'm in.
Yeah, and shout out to our friends in Austin.
A final thanks to our patrons who help keep the show ad-free. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, true that. And you can also listen to each episode on YouTube, chat with us online, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
Yep, see you next week. Hello, hello, hello. Test, test, test. Hello.
Oh, crap. Hang on. Can you hear my Spider-Man game on pause in the background? Let me turn the TV off.